This is Introduction to Finding Grants. My name is Lori Guidry. I'm an educational programming manager here with Candid, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. Now, before we start, I am going to introduce our co-host today. Candid has a community of partner locations that make our resources available. Earlier, we talked about, I showed you slides about Foundation Directory and GuideStar, which is our two main directories that help nonprofits find funding and that help funders find nonprofits. Those resources are available throughout the country via our Candid community partners. Most of them are public libraries where you can go and use these resources for free, because normally, otherwise you would have to subscribe to them in order to use them. So I'm going to have a brief presentation from one of our co-hosts, the DeKalb County Public Library in Decatur, Georgia. I want to say hey to everybody there. They are actually doing a watch party in the library. And Tashiana is going to make an introduction. So Tashiana, just let me know when I want to go forward on those slides. Okay.
Okay. So yes, you can start.
Okay. All right. We'll start with this one.
Well, hello. We are the main branch of the DeKalb County Public Library System, DCPL, and we are Candid Community, formerly FIN, access site for DCPL. That means that we are the main vein for Candid in this area. Next slide. We offer Candid digital tools, the Foundation Directory, grants to individuals, and GuideStar. Next slide, please. This just is a screenshot of our most recent flyer that offers our spring 2024 classes. They're seasonal. The webinars are streamed on site. We have tours of our in-house resources, which are our second floor reference library where Candid is located. January, which is today, our introduction to finding grants. February, how Candid helps nonprofits. March, the introduction to proposal writing. April is introduction to fundraising planning. And in May, we have It's Starting a Nonprofit Right for You. That's our spring series.
February.
Oh, just one quick note, February and May are in person with Yvonne Sims.
Okay.
You can continue. Sorry about that.
Sure.
We also have our in-house resource. We have print resources for our foundation collection, which is unique to our library. This is the lovely Elizabeth Costello. She's in the building for a minute right now, but she has supervisory duties. And I'm Tashiana Scott Cochran. I'm librarian. I'm also backup FIN access manager. And I've been with DCPL since 2022. Next slide.
Oh, that's the last one.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tashiana and Elizabeth. And like I said, welcome to all of those who are actually watching from the Decatur Public Library. As I mentioned, you can find access to these not only in Decatur, but across the country. I'm going to ask Carla to drop a Find Us link in the chat, and that's where you can go and put in your zip code and find out which location is closest to you. I'm just going to do a brief introduction for Candid here. Most of you, if you found your way to the webinar, you probably are somewhat familiar with us. But our motto is that we get you the information you need to do good. And we do that through our two main products, which are Foundation Directory and GuideStar. We also do that through a number of training classes. These webinars, introductory webinars for fundraisers, we will be having 2 a week this year in 2024. So you can always find out about our training classes. We have additional more in-depth training classes as well, including our proposal writing boot camp and other topics. So that's another thing that Candid does, as well as I said, our partner locations help make our resources more widely available. And this is the Find Us link. So we now have more than 1,100. I think we're past 1,200 locations in the US and Mexico. As I said, primarily public libraries, but also some community foundations, United Way organizations. chances are there's a location near you. So if you go to this link and you want to try out Foundation Directory or GuideStar, you can go to these locations and get access. Okay, so let's jump into the main event here, Introduction to Finding Grants. These are our objectives for today. At the completion of this training, you will know about the different types of foundations and what those foundations' motivations are for giving grants. We're also going to talk about how you present yourself to funders, how you make yourself a credible and appealing organization to invest in. I'm going to do a little short demo of Foundation Directory at the end to show you how to research potential funders and then how to plan your initial approach to a funder. We'll talk briefly about that as well. So we're going to do this in the form of a list. The 10 most important things you need to know about finding grants. And I'm going to stop my video here so my internet is acting a little funky. But so the 10 most important things you need to know about grant seeking. We're going to demystify some of that. Number one, you can't survive on grants alone. Now, I hate to kind of start on a downer here, but we do have to set expectations. Most organizations are not solely reliant on grants. They get grants, but that's not the biggest source of private contributions to nonprofits. Actually, this chart shows these are the private sources of support for nonprofits in the US. So this doesn't even include government grants, but when it comes to private sources, this tells you how it breaks out. And the vast majority of private resources for nonprofits comes from individuals. And we're not talking about necessarily wealthy individuals, a lot of whom set up their own foundations, but people like you and me who give to our favorite local nonprofits. We participate in walkathons, we give to schools, to our churches. That's the biggest source of contributions. And when you think about it, it really makes sense. There are certainly far more people in the world than there are foundations or corporations. So individuals should really be part of any fundraising plan for your organization. You see individuals represent about 64% of private contribution, but in addition, bequests, which are really individual gifts that people give after they die from their estate. So if you take that together, then individual contributions make up about 75% of all private giving. Corporations are another 6%, and then foundations are about 21%. So this illustrates why, as I said, you cannot live on grants alone, but they can be a good source of funding for your nonprofit. Point number two, not all foundations are alike. We often say around here, if you know one foundation, you know one foundation. They come in different sizes, they have different interests, they have different motivations, they have different rules. Just some foundations are going to require you to submit pages and pages of information in your application. Others don't want so much. Some will want to have a follow-up relationship with you and will check in a lot periodically. Others will just write the check and not do anything else. So this is why the research that we're going to talk about later is important, but not all foundations are alike. And we're going to talk next about some of the types of foundations. So let me also start by saying that the term foundation in an organization's name does not necessarily mean that they give money away. They're called different things. For example, the Carnegie Corporation or the Duke Endowment. So just because something has foundation in its name doesn't mean that it's a grant-making foundation. So that's something to be aware of. Now, private foundations are the type that most of you have heard of, and this is what most people think of when they think of foundations. And there are really three main types. One is independent or private foundations. These are the most common, and these are organizations whose funds are generally derived from an individual or a group of individuals or a family. And a lot of them include the family name. Some of the largest foundations in the country, like the Gates, the Ford Foundation, Kellogg, all of these started off as family foundations, and then they grew from there. But the vast majority of independent or private foundations are actually very small. They're family, but some of them may just be run by a few family members, and they have a high degree of family involvement. A lot of these foundations don't even really have staff or anything like that. And that's why it can be hard to get information on them. And that's where foundation directory comes in. So those are independent foundations, which is what most people think of when they think of private foundations. Now, company-sponsored foundations, the main difference is that their funds come from a corporation. They are still independent, operated independently. They may have their own they probably do have their own board that runs them, and they're a separate entity from the company, but they also maintain close ties with the donor company. So even though it's independent, they are still subject to some of the things that the company wants them to do. And then the third type of private foundation, which you probably won't run into as often, is called an operating foundation. And basically, this is sort of an endowment that supports a foundation's own programs. In other words, they may give grants, but their primary purpose is to support the operations of their own foundation. Example of this is the Guggenheim Foundation, which is really an operating foundation for the Guggenheim Museums, although they do make some small grants to other arts organizations. So those are the three main types of private foundations: independent, company-sponsored, and operating. Now, one thing that these have in common, and this is our third point, is that foundations must give money away. This is why they exist. And they are regulated by the IRS because they are tax exempt, and they are required by law to give away a minimum of 5% of the prior year's assets. Now, because of this, they have to annually report to the IRS who they've given grants to and how much by submitting a 990-PF. That's a tax form that is 990-PF, actually, is the tax form that's used by private foundations. And this is where we get a lot of our information for foundation directory, and which helps you search for grants. So that's the one thing all of those institutions have in common, is that, again, they are set up to give money away, and by law, they must do that. Now, there are a couple of other types of grant makers, as well as those private foundations. One is direct corporate giving programs. Now, we have a whole course about introduction to corporate giving, but basically direct corporate giving programs, as opposed to corporate foundations, are part of the company. They are not independent. It's harder to get information about them because of that. And they don't have to give money away. A lot of companies use this to give money to their own pet projects, things the executives want to support, or sometimes political things. But these corporate giving programs are, like I said, they're internal to the company. There's not as much public information, and they are not required to give any money away. So it can vary. A lot of companies have both. They have direct corporate giving, and then they also have foundations. Another type of grant maker are grant-making public charities. A lot of these fall under the category of community foundations. These are organizations that collect money from the public. That's where the source of a lot of their funding comes. They collect money from the public and then give out grants, often to support a specific community or region. A lot of these community foundations set up what are called donor advised funds, for individuals that want to make charitable giving in their communities, and then they distribute those funds. So that's another type of corporation that is given. And actually, corporations can establish private foundations. They can also set up public charities. So the next thing we're going to look at is, what are the funder motivations for giving? Now, depending on the type of foundation, those motivations may change. So in terms of private foundations, they primarily have philanthropic goals and interests. And they'll support a variety of issues, or maybe they only support one or two issues. They might focus on the environment or education, or they may cast a wide net in terms of the things that they're interested in. But the important thing when you're researching is to remember that each foundation has specific goals and interests. So the main purpose of your research is to find a funder that is interested in the issue areas that you are working on. So before you approach any potential funders, you want to know if you align with their goals and with their interest. And again, with private foundations, these are strictly philanthropic interests. They want to, make a difference in society. They want to do good, and that's what they're set up for. Now, corporate foundations are a little bit different. They are interested in, doing good and everything, but they are also interested in promoting the company. So they're not purely philanthropic. They often give to nonprofits that help advance their business objectives. So they're much more focused on visibility and branding. If you get money, get a grant from a corporation, they want you to promote it. They want you to have their name on your site and things like this, because it's not just about doing good. It's about also enhancing their brand and enhancing their visibility. So that's what's different about corporations when it comes to giving. Grant-making public charities, closer to private foundations when it comes to motivations. They want to make an impact, but they want to make an impact in a specific community or region. So often they will have a variety of interests. The commonality is that these are issues that improve life for the people in this particular community or region or population group that they focus on. So they are a lot of the other foundations can be very geographic oriented as well, but grant-making public charities in particular really focus on geography even more than issues. Okay, number 4, we're going to jump here to about grant writing. When you approach a foundation, grant writing is never about the need of your organization. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Grant seeking is a very competitive process. When approaching funders for support, you have to kind of prove to them that you're a credible nonprofit with the past capacity to carry out your planned idea or purpose or project. And you must also show that it's not just about the need of your organization. In other words, it's not about that, we need more trucks to deliver food, or we need a new building. What you really want to emphasize is that we need new trucks because those trucks are going to enable us to serve X number of meals and reach X number of people. In other words, it's not just about what your organization needs, but the need of the community or the issue that you're serving. And that's what if you're asking for money to renovate a building, okay, how does that, what does that do for the larger charitable purpose? That's what you want to emphasize. No, it's not just that we want to renovate the building, but we are trying to create, say, a nicer space for our after school teens to hang out in, things like that. So always remember that it isn't about your need, it's about the need or the community of the organization, of the people that you are serving. And when I talk about credibility and improving that, first thing to remember is that, you have to be a legal nonprofit in order to get a grant for a foundation. That's the basic thing. In other words, in the US, that means being a 501c3 certified tax exempt by the IRS. Okay, that's what makes you a legal nonprofit. And it's important because by law, the foundations, as I mentioned, have to give money away, but they also have to give it away for charitable purposes. So you have to be an organization that's set up for charitable purposes. So that is really the rule overall, with very few exceptions. So that's the first thing when you're seeking a grant is that, are you a legal nonprofit? That's going to be an important issue for the funder. The second thing is, do you have a compelling mission that is compatible with the funders? We talk a lot about mission alignment, as again, their foundations tend to focus on particular issues or even a variety of issues. But if they're a funder that's focused mainly on environment, then if you have an arts organization, that's probably not going to be a match. So that's really the point of your research is to find funders whose mission is similar to yours. Do you have strong leadership? That's something else that's important. You're working, they're giving a grant to an organization, but this is always about people. In other words, your staff, your executives, what are their qualifications? That's something that a lot of funders are going to want to know about. Are they, capable of achieving the things that your organization says you're set up to achieve? Another thing is, do you provide high quality programs that meet a real need in the community? Remember, it's about the need of the community. And that's something that you're going to have to express to funders because you know your community better than they do. So you're able to say, yes, we have, homelessness is a problem in this community, or, teens at risk is a problem in this community. How are your programs meeting those needs? That's something you have to think about when you're talking to and approaching funders. And then finally, do you have a strong organizational and financial infrastructure? If they give you these funds, are you set up to keep track of them, to use them wisely, and make sure they go to where they're supposed to go? So basically, funders are looking for nonprofits that are successful, that are capable of doing the work they are promising in their proposal. What does this mean for newer organizations? Can you get a grant? Yes, it's a lot harder though. You do have an uphill battle because you don't have a track record of actually providing the programs and things. So newer organizations, sometimes you may have to rely on other sources of funding. I won't say it's impossible to get a grant, but it is more challenging. Funders are more or less making an investment, and they want to make an investment in something that they think is going to be successful. And I'm going to take a little detour here just to mention about your Candid profile, which I mentioned about our GuideStar directory. Foundation directory is where you go as a nonprofit if you're looking for grants to find out who's funding. GuideStar is where funders go to research nonprofits. In other words, to see information about them, find out if they're legitimate, things like that. Now, you can use your Candid profile to demonstrate your credibility. The thing is, let me back up here. The thing is, if you are a 501c3, if you have filed a tax return at least 1 year, then you have a profile on GuideStar. We put information in there directly from the IRS, so you're there. The difference is that we give you the opportunity to enhance that profile to what we call claim the profile and earn seals of transparency that enables you to tell your story. And I'll tell you how exactly that works. But if you go into GuideStar and you claim your profile, you can add more information so that when funders, for example, donor advised funds, all kinds of foundations, they use GuideStar to do their due diligence when they're looking for organizations to fund. So it enhances your credibility and makes you look good to have claimed your profile on GuideStar and then added the information that you feel is important. So we have 4 levels of seals of transparency. There's the bronze level. At the very least, you just share your mission statement and make sure your contact information is up to date so that if anybody stumbles on that profile, they know where to donate. That's the first level of seals. And then the silver seal is where you can add more information about your specific programs. You can add your logo, any brand details, any promotional materials, things like that you can link to by earning your silver seal. The gold seal enables you to provide your financial and your leadership information. In other words, any audited financial statements or things like that. And also leadership composition. A lot more funders now are interested in knowing that, your organization leaders reflect the community that you're serving. So demographics on your leadership is an important thing for a lot of funders to know now. And by uploading that information into GuideStar, you have it into one place and it enables you to earn your gold seal. Platinum seal is the highest level. And with that, you really highlight your impact. You can share a strategic plan. You can share any metrics that you use to measure your success. It's really, a lot more in depth. It takes a little more time to earn the platinum seal, but it's worth it in that now you have all this information that highlights your impact in one place. So now you can, we have lots of information available about claiming your seal if you go to help.candid.org/s. There are guides on how you claim your seal, what types of information you should include in there, and then where that information goes. And it's really, it's an easy process to claim your seal. You just go to the site and register for an account, and all of this is in the help guide. You can probably claim your profile and earn a bronze seal in under 15 minutes. The main thing is to just, we have to verify that you speak for your organization. So when you start out claiming the seal, then I suggest you do it using your work email address. Because the first thing they'll want to do is just verify that you're able to speak for your organization, and then you can start the process from there. So as I said, there's a lot of benefit. You just never know who's looking on GuideStar. There are a lot of funders who are looking on there. And if you're going to show up, you just want to make sure you show up in the best way possible. Okay, back to finding grants. Number 5, do your homework first. You never want to approach a grant maker unprepared. And when seeking a grant, you want to know as much as possible about who you're approaching before you submit a letter of inquiry, which is usually the first step. This is just a one-page summary of who you are, what you're seeking funding for, and how much you're seeking before you do a full grant proposal. But you don't even want to submit that first until you've done a little bit of homework and a little bit of research. And as I said, I'll show you in a minute how you can use Foundation Directory to do that. The other thing to be aware is that the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. You can't just, do one grant proposal and then send it out to a variety of funders. You really have to tailor your proposal. And we say you can't reuse a proposal, but you can repurpose it. Some of the information is going to be similar in terms of the background of your organization and what you're doing. One comparison is to think about it as applying for a job. You're not going to send the same cover letter or resume necessarily to every job. You're going to look and see exactly what they're looking for, and then you're going to tailor your approach to that particular employer. And it's the same thing with applying for grants. You have to really, let the funder know that you know about them and you know why, so that you can make the case as to why they should support you based on what you see has been their interest in things. So you really want to create an individual strategy for each potential funder about approaching them. And as I mentioned, foundations are different. Some may only want a letter of inquiry. Maybe they don't have a very in-depth grant application process, and then others do. So you need to know all this before you seek a grant, before you send anything off to someone. Number 7, to get the grant, you have to find the right match. Remember, we said mission alignment is really key in approaching grant makers. The number one reason funders say they don't, haven't funded a particular organization is because it didn't fit with our interests. It didn't fit with our mission and our alignment. So that's the first thing you want to do, is to try to find that match. Few questions to ask. Who funds in my area of interest in the population you serve? Who's interested in, say, education or the environment? Who's interested in immigrants or ex-offenders? Whatever it is that your organization is working on, chances are there are some funders out there who are interested in that. But your job is to narrow it down to those who are most interested in what you're seeking to fund. Who funds in my geographic region? A lot of grants are very locally focused. Even national organizations of funders usually focus on a few key geographic regions, but there are lots of funders who will only give in a particular city or maybe a state or something like that. So geography is very important. Your best bet is to look for funders who are interested first in your region and then in the issues or your population. And the third thing is who will provide the type of support I need. Most grants at this stage of the game are what we call program-based. In other words, they're support for a particular program and only that program, only that particular cost. So let's say you have a health-focused nonprofit and you have clinics or things like that. The grant support will be specifically for the work you're doing in those clinics, the vaccines you're providing or the healthcare you're providing. Now, nonprofits, of course, we have lots of other needs, right? We have our basically administrative cost. We have people who maybe are not working in the field with the health people, but they're doing marketing or they're doing fundraising. We have to support them. This has been a long debate in philanthropy that organizations need more than just program support. They need general operating support. Sadly, that's still the exception rather than the rule. But that's something to think about when you're going out for support, that, if you just need program support, if you want to do that, if you're looking for more things like, general support, capital campaigns, things like that, you're going to have to, kind of research your funders to see who will do that. Another good idea is to look for funders who are already giving you a grant. Maybe that first grant is program oriented, and then you can, make that a more general support grant. But in general, as I said, most grants now are for actually program cost and not for what they call overhead, keeping the lights on, paying personnel who are not directly involved in the mission, things like that. Now, nonprofits have been trying to make the case that this type of support is very important, and it's essential to being able to do those other mission-oriented things. But as I said, a lot of grants, especially first-time grants, are not going to be for that type of general support. So that's something you need to think about, again, and something to look at when you're researching funders. And this is just about Foundation Directory, which I'm going to show you in a minute. As I mentioned before, you can access the directory at any of our Candid partner locations. You can subscribe, of course, but if you can't afford it or not sure about it, please, find our nearest partner location and you can go and research it there. Another thing that's important to find out when seeking grants is to ask for the right amount. As I mentioned, a lot of grants are going to be for program support, and you will have to submit a budget that says, these are the costs and this is how much we're asking for. So asking for the right amount is something that you can get an idea of when you're doing research in Foundation Directory. You can look at the size of their grants, to your particular area as well, so that you can ask for the right amount. So let's say you have program cost of $100,000. You're not going to find one grant maker that's going to foot the bill for all of that. You're going to probably look for, 3 to 5 grants of, 20 to 30,000 each to make up for that. Nobody wants to be the sole source of support. So figuring out, how much to ask for, not too much, not too little, is going to be based on what that budget is, what you're attempting to fund. But that's something, again, that you can research in the directory. Something else you can find out about in Foundation Directory are the people associated with the funder. As we say, you don't need to know someone to get a grant, but it certainly doesn't help. It can help you get your foot in the door. Of course, we've heard of there are many nonprofits who don't know someone initially and that apply for a grant. It's not impossible, but if you can find that connection, that's all the more way to enhance the chances of you're actually successfully getting the grant. So in Foundation Directory, we list the board members or staff. You might find a connection there, any other organizations or partners that you work with. Your current funders sometimes will give you leads to other funders. And then also always check your LinkedIn network. You'll see in Foundation Directory that a lot of times some of the staff members or board members will have a LinkedIn icon, and so that they'll know. But the thing is to talk to not only your staff, but board members, any of your current supporters. Once you've narrowed it down to a few funders that you want to approach, try to see if you have a connection with them already. Try to see if somebody knows somebody there. And then that's a good way to help you get your foot in the door. As I said, it's not a requirement, but it certainly can help, push your application to the front if you can make that connection at the funder. Last thing to know, number 10, is that the proposal is typically not the first thing a foundation wants. We talk a lot about grants and things, but there's something that, there's a lot that precedes actually submitting that grant application. In addition to the research, we suggest you make an initial approach to the funder. Again, even if you're not sure you know someone, it's acceptable to try to make a phone call, to reach out by email, to just kind of get a better idea of what they're looking for. Now, you don't want to reach out and ask them something, basic that you could find out through research, well, do you fund environmental groups? That's not the kind of thing you want to ask for. But maybe you do want to ask, do you provide general operating support? Or are you interested in groups that are working, my group is working in sort of a niche area? That's a good thing to reach out for, to ask questions about. But it's perfectly acceptable to try to make a phone call. Some organizations will tell you, no calls, and you have to respect that. I'm not saying every funder is going to be open to that. But the thing to keep in mind is that, as I said, foundations are set up to give money away. Okay, so you're never out of line to try to find out information about getting that grant. It's best to talk to a specific person. As I said, you can get lists of board members or staff from Foundation Directory, or maybe you can get it from their website or things like that. It's best to start with a specific name. Keep the conversation brief and to the point, to be polite. But there's nothing wrong with making that initial contact so that they know when they see that LOI, you have kind of laid the groundwork and they're already familiar with it before you actually submit anything. Like I said, the grant application, they can be very onerous sometimes, and it's okay to do a little preliminary research so that you will have an idea of whether this is a good idea to go through all of this to apply to this particular funder. Okay, I'm going to pause here. And before I jump into Foundation Directory, I'm going to ask Carla and Tracy. I know they've been answering questions all along, but see if there's any other questions I can answer right now before we do that.
Sure. I had flagged some questions for you to answer on air, but you have already answered some of them.
Oh, okay.
So here are a few. Regarding credibility, can you offer specific examples of effectively demonstrating strong leadership? I'm imagining in particular an LOI where the word count is very limited.
Oh, yes. Yes, and LOIs usually are, we teach in our proposal writing boot camp that they can be to about 500 words. The best things you can do, as I said, in addition to being a legal nonprofit, is to try to be as specific as possible in that short space. In other words, talking about actually what you've achieved, talking about anecdotes about people who have been helped, any highlights of things that you have actually done. You want to think about that and get those up front. Because yes, in a phone call, in a short phone call or in an LOI, you don't have a lot of time to make that good first impression. So you want to lead with the best. You want to lead with those things that you're doing well. If you've had a particular success in something, you want to lead with that. As I said, anecdotes about people who have actually been helped, who are fans of your service. Those are all good things to start with.
Okay, thank you, Lori. We have another question we flagged. Must a 990 be available to the public by law on the irs.gov site? Or is it okay if it is available just from the 5013C itself?
By law, the 990 is public information. So someone can get the 990. You can not only get it in Foundation Directory, you could go to the IRS site. It's a lot more cumbersome to look there. But by law, the 990 has to be publicly available. And you have to make it publicly available. Someone asks you for your 990 because you are a tax exempt organization, you do have to make that available.
Great, thank you. Do you want to answer a few more questions or do you want to keep going?
I'll answer a few more and then we'll jump into the directory. Yeah.
Okay. Someone was asking if GuideStar or Candid nonprofit profiles are only available for organizations in the US.
At this time, yes. And that's because every country has different guidelines about what they consider a charitable or a nonprofit. In the US, that's having 501c3 status. In other places, non-governmental organizations or NGOs have different requirements. So at this time, it is only available. We would only have US organizations in there.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, my Q&A just shifted, so I lost the question. But we had a few questions from people that were from newer organizations that were wondering about how to establish a track record with funders if they don't have a previous history of funding from other funders.
Yeah, that's a challenge. That's a question we get a lot. And newer organizations a lot of times are better off maybe relying on individual donors. Or your board members, possibly earned income. Like I said, they're kind of hard to come by if you don't have that track record. Something else that can help is if perhaps your leadership has a track record. You might be a new organization, but maybe your leaders have worked with other organizations in the past, and that's something else that you might be able to play up to get a grant if your leadership has a track record of working with other organizations. But it is challenging. It is challenging. And as I said, sometimes you're not ready to get a grant until you have been operating for a little while.
Thank you, Lori.
Okay, all right. Well, I am going to jump into a demo of Foundation Directory here, and then we can get to any other questions after that. As I mentioned, Foundation Directory is available for free use at any of our partner locations. This is what it looks like. If you go there and you log in, this is the first page. I usually recommend that people start with an advanced search. So you would click on here, and then you would get all of these fields to fill in. So we just talked about the most important things to ask when you're trying to see if there is an alignment with a particular funder. First thing is the subject area, and that's what you need to do here. What is the issue that you're working on, and what funders are interested in that? So there's two ways to do this. You can browse. We have a number of labels in here. Anytime you see that little down arrow, you can, open that up and just keep going down and down into specific topics of interest. So you can do that. The other thing you can do is just to start typing in this area and put in. So for example, you're looking for environmental grants. Let's just say environmental justice. You put in environmental, it will bring up everywhere that term appears. So let's click this. You can also combine terms. When you're thinking about subject words, before you start searching in the database, it's a good thing to think about actually what you're working on. So say, for example, maybe you're providing services to homeless people, but you're also specifically looking to do something for children, maybe who are in homeless shelters, and you have a program that specifically gives them tutoring or support after school or something like that. So in that case, yes, you're working with homelessness, but you're also working with children. So you don't want to just search under homelessness. You want to search under maybe elementary education or after school program. So think broadly about exactly what you're doing. And you might want to write down a number of terms that describe that. So say, even in this case, say you're environmental justice group, but you have a program where you go to schools and put on theater productions to teach children about the importance of the environment or something. So maybe you want to look for funders of the environment, but maybe you also want to look for funders of the arts. So let's say you want to, as I said, you're putting on theater productions, so you would look for both. Now notice when I put the second term in, then this little line popped up. So match any or match all. So this is how you combine results. So match any of them means that they will look for funders of both of environmental justice and funders of theater. If I say match all, they will only look for funders that fund both of those things together. But that's one way you can combine terms if you can't find the exact term you're looking for. But again, until you put that second term in, you won't see that little line. So subject area is most important. Geographic funding, where the funding will be used. For example, I'm in San Francisco Bay Area, so I can do San Francisco County, I can do San Francisco the city. You can do a specific particular city, you can do a county, you can do a region. You can't do national, that's the only thing, but it doesn't matter because if funders have funded in your area, then they will show up. Now you see geographic focus here, and then you see location underneath. The difference is that geographic focus is where the funder funds. Location is where the funder is located. So you really want to use geographic focus in most cases, unless for some reason you only wanted to look at funders who were in your backyard. And, actually you want to cast a wide net and find anybody who's interested in where you're located. There could be a funder in Florida, for example, that funds in San Francisco because, maybe it's a family foundation and their daughter lives in San Francisco or something. So the thing is, you want to say where are they funding and not just where they're located. So that's why we use geographic focus. Now, those are really the only two boxes you need to fill in. You could add a population served. So for example, if you're specifically working with, people of African descent, of, Asian descent, gender and sexual identity, health status, people with disabilities, any demographic you can think of probably would be listed here. So if the who is more important than the why, then you could do that as well. Maybe you're working with an immigrant population and you're providing a multitude of services. Then you might want to add a population served. So these two, subject area and geographic focus, are essential. You could add a population served if you wanted to. These other things, if you wanted to look up just a particular funder, you could do that, or per person who is on the board. But this most often, this is the type of search that you're going to do, a subject area and a geographic focus. So I'm going to show you the results here for this. So this first page gives you an overview of your search. So I found that there are 84 grant makers who have made 173 grants to 45 recipients, 45 environmental justice groups in San Francisco. So that's basically what this tells you. The first thing you want to look at is that grant maker list, because that's going to give you your prospect list. So you want to do view all. And then you can see all of the grant makers here. They will be listed in order of grant count. In other words, the ones that have made the most grants to environmental justice in San Francisco, and then it will go down the list. So even if you have a long list, when we get kind of to the bottom where maybe they've only made one grant or so over the last few years, then you probably not the best prospects. You want to focus on the top of the list here. But this is how you can search. This little box here will let you exclude grant makers not accepting applications. We usually don't recommend that you do that. There are a lot of grant makers who don't have what we call an open application process. So anytime you check this, you will probably get rid of half your list. Let's see. Yeah, even more. We went down from 84 to 30. The reason we don't suggest you do this, grant makers have to give money away. And it doesn't mean they're not giving money away because they don't have an open application process. It just means that they're trying to be a little more selective about groups, or maybe they don't have a big staff to kind of go through things. So there could be a lot of reasons they don't accept applications, but it doesn't mean that you can't approach them. If you do your research and you find, hey, they've been funding community theater groups in Oakland, and I have a community theater group in Oakland, then you need to find a way to get in front of that grant maker. And sometimes it's a matter of making that phone call or sending an LOI or something like that. But if you only focus on grant makers who have an open process, you're already cutting your list way down. So we suggest that you don't click this, that you look first for funders who match your mission. And then if they, you might have two lists within that, you might come up with funders who match your mission. Maybe you want to focus on those with an open process first, but don't discount those that say, no unsolicited requests. It doesn't mean they're not approachable. It just means you have to figure out another way to get in front of them. And again, this is where making a phone call or sending a letter or finding connections can be very important. But these funders are giving money away just because they don't have an open process. So you don't want to ignore that. So these are our funders. And as you can see, they come there, even though we did San Francisco, we have funders in different states. That's because they fund in San Francisco, even if they don't are not located there. And that's why you do a geographic focus. So this is a typical funder profile. This first up here at the top, you can see when the profile was last updated. This particular funder is what we call an e-grant reporter, which means they give their information directly to us. We don't have to wait for the IRS forms, which can sometimes take 2 years to be downloaded. So this one, that's why the information is a little more current. So this will show you the most recent 5 years. In other words, this is for the funder overall. So we see here that these are their main areas: human rights, the environment, then health and agricultural. So when you're looking at funders, it's important to know that your issue is a top priority for them. And that's what you can find out from this little snapshot. So if I'm an environmental group and I see human rights and environment are their top priority, I'm feeling pretty good about this funder, that they're going to be somebody who's interested in what I'm doing. This is where the money is going. Again, this funder is in Colorado, but it seems like they do a lot in California, and maybe because there are a lot of environmental groups in California. They do a lot in California, in Washington. So, funders sometimes spread out. In this case, they do. So, but this little snapshot tells you where the money is going. And then this shows you how big their grants are. So it seems their sweet spot is grants of 10,000 or less. So that's good information to know when you're asking for funds. In other words, if you're looking for a $25,000 or $50,000 grant, they don't do as many of those, but they do some. But this seems to be their sweet spot at 10,000 or less. Now down here, where it says most common grant amount, this is particular to your search. These are the size of the grants for the organization overall. This is the most common grant amount to environmental justice groups in San Francisco. So that's what that tells you. So here, this is a list of all of the grants that they have made in recent years. This gives you an idea. For example, they seem to, fund a lot of different groups. Sometimes you'll see a funder and they just have one group they fund over and over again. It might be more of a challenge with that funder, but this group, as you can see, funds a number of different types of groups. There's usually application information. Again, this is a funder that contributes only to pre-selected organizations. But again, if you are, if you look at this list and these are groups that are similar to yours, they're doing what you're doing, and you want to take a shot, then by all means do so. The other thing you'll find down here is the who's who. So here we have a whole list of their officers and their staff. So you can find a particular name of someone to find out if anybody that knows them. And it even lists who the grants associates are if you wanted to reach out. But this is good information to have in these profiles. This gives you any recent news about the organization. Following their online communications. If you find a funder you're interested in, follow them on Facebook or Twitter. See what kinds of content they're putting out, what they're interested in. You can also get names from that, people who are maybe speaking somewhere or something. And then here in the last box here, there'll usually be some contact information. Sometimes this is blank. Sometimes there's only a location, a physical location, in which case sending a letter is probably the best way to go. In this case, they actually have an email, a name, a phone number. They have a website. You might be shocked to know that only about 10 to 15% of funders actually have a website. So we have over 250,000 funders in Foundation Directory. A lot of them do not have websites. So this is why a directory like this is critical, because otherwise you wouldn't know that those funders exist. They don't, advertise the fact. Maybe they don't have the staff to field all the questions they would get about that. So this is why a tool like Foundation Directory can be really helpful. So I'm going to go back. We're going to wrap up in a little while here, and I'm going to ask everyone to fill out our survey. But in the meantime, I'll go back, Carla, and see if there are any more questions.
Sure. We did have a question asking which version of Foundation Directory you're using, but I believe this is the one people would have access to if they're visiting their local Candid community partner.
Yes.
Professional version. Yeah.
Yes, there are two versions. There's the professional version and the essential. Professional, the full version is what you would have access to at our Candid community partners. You can subscribe to what we call Foundation Directory Essential, which is, it has a little less information. It has all the grant makers, but this grants and recipients information, you would not have in Essential. In other words, you couldn't see exactly what the grants are. You would know how many grants they gave, but you wouldn't have the grants information in Essential. So, but yes, if you go to one of our partners, you get professional version.
Okay, thank you. We also had a few questions that were asking about how to reach individual donors.
Yes, that's kind of beyond the scope of this class. I do encourage you, we do have a introductory class, Introduction to Individual giving, which talks about that. But yeah, it's two different skills and processes. This is mainly about getting grants from foundations, so that's a little out of scope for us. But yeah, I do encourage you to look into that, particularly if you are a newer organization, then you might want to look at our class on individual giving.
Okay, thank you. I think this is an interesting question. Can you build credibility based more on the executive director and quality of your volunteer team? Or is it better to stress the credentials of the board, even if their credentials are less august?
That is an interesting question. I would think that your staff and executives would be more important. I'm going to ask my colleague Tracy if she has any thoughts on that too. And I say that because they're involved in the day-to-day running of your organization. Your board members, that's not their role. So I would think probably your staff qualifications would be more important.
Okay, thank you. Sorry,
can you repeat that question one more time? I heard my name come up.
Sorry, Tracy, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I was answering someone's question in the Q&A box.
Okay. No, the question was whether it was more important to emphasize your leadership team or your board members when you're trying to prove yourself as a nonprofit and your credibility.
Okay. I mean, I think it would depend on your situation, and it would depend how far along in your nonprofit's life cycle you are. Like, how big is your team? Are you well established or not? I mean, generally, either way, they're going to ask you for your list of board members. If your board members are heavily involved in a lot of the day-to-day work and a lot of the big decisions that get made, and you think that there's someone or some people on your board who are a huge asset for your credibility, then by all means, talk about them. If you think, meanwhile, that someone else on your staff is really like a major asset that's going to impress funders, and they're going to think, ooh, we should trust these people. That, say, program director sounds like they have fantastic experience and really know how to make an impact. Lean on whatever feet you think are going to be the most successful, whether it's board, staff, or both. Probably a little bit of both.
Thank you. I knew you'd have a more nuanced answer. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else come in, Carla?
We have a lot of questions, so we can power through as much as we can.
Yes, we will. And those of you, if you're going to jump off, please do take a moment to complete our survey. We really appreciate the feedback. Thanks for all the reactions as well. But yeah, I'll stay on and answer. We have a few more minutes to answer questions. So
yeah, and just in case anyone missed it, we are sending everyone to tomorrow. We'll be sending an email with today's recording as well as the slides and other resources. In the meantime, someone asked if you have any advice or recommendations to grant seeking when your population is in 30 states, and somebody else chimed in that there's a spread across 50 states. So they were very interested to hear about that.
Oh yeah, that is challenging. I would think in a lot of cases, and I'm going to ask Tracy to think about that one too, but in a lot of cases, even if you're spread out, you're stronger in some areas than others. So you might want to, particularly emphasize, finding funding for those particular areas, but you are going to have to sort of search location by location. I think that would probably be the best way in Foundation Directory to do that. And again, I'm going to ask Tracy if she has a different take on that.
Okay, yeah, this is about a national organization.
Yes, a organization that operates nationally. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there are tons of nonprofits that have a national scope to their programs, and they find grants all the time. I mean, first of all, there are a lot of funders that they themselves have a national focus, and really specific geography is less important to them. Like a lot of the largest household name funders are going to be that way. And if you're a national program, like they won't even question it. If you're talking to a more regionally focused funder, meanwhile, then you're probably going to want to break out some information about your programs that are more specific to that region. Like, if you have a national program, but you're focused on a funder who cares about something around the area of San Diego, then look at how much of your programming reaches or impacts people around San Diego and give them that information. And that I think will take you a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, I would also, like I said, suggest, yeah, you can look nationally, but look regionally too. And like I said, if you're stronger in some locations than others, focus on those.
Okay, thank you. Someone else has asked, I work for a university foundation where all university programs fall under us. When answering basic information in a grant application, should I include the foundation information or information specific to the program, such as operating budget, etc.?
This will kind of one of those questions that depends on the funder. This is probably a good opportunity to reach out to that funder and ask them that in particular. I would think that you're going to focus on the program because, as I mentioned, most grants are program or project oriented. They're not for the overall. So I would think you would focus on that. But this is one of those things that gives you an excuse to reach out to a funder you're interested in and ask them, hey, how should I approach this? How should I deal with this in the application?
Okay, thank you. Another question regarding what to put in terms of program specifics. They write, what is your advice for writing grants that are for programs, but the only cost of the program is the staff salaries? We provide free one-to-one advocacy, so there are no general costs, but to operate the program, we have staff.
Mm-hmm. If that's what your budget is for, then that's what, you would submit in the application. It's just, I don't think there's a problem if your services are personnel dependent and that's what you're doing, then that has to be included. If you were, for example, if you were a school or health clinic, then the costs for the doctors or for the teachers or something, that's the cost of operating the program. Sometimes your costs are just about people and not about things. So yeah, that's what you would include.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a few more minutes. So another question, are you required to register for solicitation in the state where the foundation resides, or is grant seeking independent of registration?
Nonprofits, they're regulated on the federal level with the IRS, but they're also on state level. You have to apply to fundraise, and that's usually your local, your Secretary of State or whatever. It's not where the foundation is. I believe it's where you're located. That's where you would apply to be able to fundraise. Is that right, Tracy? Do you have to apply in each state? I didn't think you did. I thought you just had to apply in the state where you're registered. But I might be wrong.
For fundraising, I mean, this is the kind of thing that a lawyer's input is going to be the final say on it rather than any of us.
Yeah.
But in general, for fundraising, you have to be registered in any state in which you intend to fundraise. And that includes not just places where you're actively going there to ask for funding, but including like passive solicitation, where like, say you have a donate now button on your website, and if someone who lives in a state where you're not registered were to donate, you'd run into a problem. And all the different states have totally different rules, totally different rules about how to renew, whether there's a fee or not. And so it is complicated. Oftentimes people start by just registering in a few states, like their own state and a few surrounding ones and things like that, and kind of branch out from there.
Yeah, but this is something, I would encourage you to get professional advice and not just take our word for it.
Okay, thank you. Some others had asked if you had any thoughts on obtaining a grant writing certificate. They have heard mixed reviews, they wrote, and a few others chimed in. They were interested to learn more about that as well.
I certainly think training in grant writing, especially if this is not your first profession, is beneficial to you? How do, I guess you're asking how do employers look at that, or how do funders look at that? I'm not really able to say about that. I mean, like I said, I think if you're going to do a program, it should be because it's helping you with your skills. I don't know that necessarily if you go to apply, people are going to say, oh, great, you have this certificate or not. Again, Tracy, you have any input on that?
Sorry, I was working on answering another question.
I keep putting you on the spot. Yeah. But no, about grant certification programs. I don't want to say you shouldn't get it. I just think, it depends. As I said, if it enhances your skills and makes you more confident about your ability to grant write. How do other people see it? I think it does vary. I don't know that every employer necessarily would look at that, or if you're a consultant, I don't know if that's going to be of benefit to them.
I would agree. I would say 20 or 30 years ago, something like that maybe carried a little more weight. I'm not sure that it's completely necessary today. It's a nice to have, but probably not a must have. I think overall, the quality of your work and how much experience you have is going to take you further.
All right. Well, we're about at time. I could maybe do one more, Tracy, but yeah, we're about at time. I mean, Carla.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just scrolling through. We have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But some of them, quite a few of them have been answered already.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap it up then. You will be getting a follow-up email that will not only have the recording, but any links and things that we mentioned. I'm going to say again, please fill out our survey, and thank you for all of the reactions. And hope this was helpful. All right. Thank you, everyone.